Hello, and welcome to episode 14 of Intercultural Insiders. My name is John McGraw, and I help expats and newcomers feel confident in their new country in less time and pain. I am the founder of Hiyaku Coaching, which is dedicated to helping you create your pathway to success in a new culture. And the purpose of Intercultural Insiders is to share the stories of people with intercultural experiences. So if you're feeling isolated or lost, you can hear something from the guests' experiences that could help you, even if it's just a reminder that you're not alone. And today, we're going to get into a great discussion with another guest, Kasia Lynch. But before we get to that, I want to share a story of an experience that I had going to a supermarket. Now, this might seem quite ordinary, and I suppose in many ways it is. But for me, it was a bit of a new experience because I didn't go just to any random supermarket. In Canada, some of the chains are Sobeys, for example, or Loblaws. I actually went to a specific supermarket as part of a challenge, a supermarket called Iqbal's, which is a chain that specializes in foods that one would find in the Middle East and Pakistan and India and those parts of the world. Although, of course, it does have many of the products that are available here elsewhere in Canada as well. And I was challenged by my friend Shahzad Gidwani, who you may remember was a guest last month here on the show. And he challenged me to go there because he told me, he mentioned to me that many immigrants in Canada won't go to many of the more established chains, as I mentioned, such as Sobeys or Loblaws or other well known Canadian supermarket chains until they've been in the country for many years, but that many newcomers will go to Iqbal's. And beyond one would assume some of the products that are specialized there, or beyond maybe some of the languages that you might hear there, he suggested that I go there, pick up a flyer, explore the store, and see what I see from there. So, decided to do that. So, my wife Liliana and I, we decided we drove out there and went around in the store. And again, there's a tool that is commonly used in the intercultural community to encourage observing things objectively without judgment. And there are many tools with many acronyms, but the one that I like was developed by Darla K. Deirdroff, and she uses the OC tool, which is to OC. So O, observe what's happening. S, state objectively what is happening. E, explore different explanations for what is happening. And the second E, evaluate which explanation is the most likely one. So for this, I thought I would follow the tool, follow my own advice to just break down what it is I see. And I'll be interested to hear from Shahzad, as I'll be meeting with him later this week, to see what he thinks of my observations and some of my explanations. So, I observed what was there, and let me state some of the things that I saw when I entered the supermarket. So, when I first entered, the first thing I saw was a big sign stating "Welcome" in multiple languages. As I went further into the store, there were people of many ethnicities there that I could see. But aside from myself, I didn't see any white people there. It was quite busy, and as we made our way through the store, saw many products that were available, many that were again available in Canada, and some that seemed to be from other parts of the world, such as Pakistan, India, and other parts of the Middle East. The meat counter in the back corner was quite large and was very busy. There were many cuts, many carcasses of animals that you might not see in most deli counters in Canada, but they were kept very fresh. And um, there were many customers. There were lots of customers around that area. It was obvious. It seemed to be a very popular area, and they were standing around, but they weren't waiting in a line. Now they weren't making. They weren't. They did seem there did seem to be some order there, but they weren't in a line, and some were sitting down on seats lined up near one of the open freezers. And the logo of Iqbal's is actually it's Iqbal's and then has Canada underneath. And in the logo, there is a maple leaf there as well. And one other thing I noticed as we were going through the checkouts, all of the checkout counters had Canadian flags. So that's what I observed in an objective sense, or at least as objectively as I could put it. And I'm just going to go through a couple of explanations for what I saw. Now, referring to the Canadian presence of the Canadian flags and the logo and at the counters, well, one possible explanation for that is maybe from a more cynical viewpoint is that it's a defense against Islamophobia, which it does exist to some extent in Canada. Maybe a way of showing that they're Canadian and reducing the sense of otherness in some sense. There may be some truth to that, but I like to think that, along with some of the other things that I observed, that there's maybe another different explanation as well. Noting the seats that were at the meat counter, this is something that, again, I haven't observed in other places, but um, it's to me that encouraged the sense of staying longer and taking the time. And again, that's not something I've generally seen at meat counters in other supermarkets or other delis. Again, maybe I don't go to enough of them, but I feel that there's more of a idea of like getting your cuts and going and leaving. But the fact that there is something there for people to wait maybe encourages that more people will stick around. And again, I think also the sense of the Canadian flags at the counters indicates more of a sense of welcoming people. Hey, welcome to Canada. And it's their way of doing that. Again, that's my possible observation of that combination of those things together. And again, maybe in other places, and I want to make it clear for those who are maybe not familiar with Canada, it's not that common to see Canadian flags around in private places, private property. You'll see them in government buildings and some other public places, but you don't see them often. People flying them on their cars occasionally. Outside of Canada Day, for example, it's rare to see them on private homes. It's maybe in comparison to, say, images of the U.S., where it seems like the American flags are more common. So the fact that we're there at all of the checkout counters was a pretty distinct thing. So those are some of the things that I observed in my thoughts. And I think also the idea of waiting around and encouraging people to wait, I think is also another cultural thing in comparison to, say, Canadian culture. It's the difference of being more, say, time focused. Time is a finite resource versus building relationships. Uh, Canada, we like the US and like many other countries, the idea time is money. Okay, we have things to do. We have to get going. Let's get the customers going and get them out here. Whereas here, I think it's more maybe less planned, but just take your time and get what you need. And I think that might also add to that sense of comfort. So those are my possible explanations. And to evaluate, I'm interested to hear what Shazad thinks of my observations, and if there's anything that I missed or have different interpretations. And if any of you who are watching have thoughts to share, please feel free to comment on that as well. Incidentally, also got some great food from the Silver Spoon counter inside Iqbal's, which specializes in Pakistani cuisine, which I had been introduced to by a friend of mine, Syed, a few months ago. So we had some great chicken biryani, some curry and naan, samosas, and this great dessert. I think it's gulab jamun. I think it's pronounced. And again, but I could go on and on. But I should, of course, introduce the guest that we have today and the interview we have today, which is with Kasia Lynch, who is the founder of ikigaiConnections.com, that includes nihongojobs.com. She connects people in the United States with employment opportunities, allowing them to use their Japanese language skills. And she's lived in 4 different countries, Poland, Italy, Japan, and the US. And in today's interview, she talks about her early experiences learning English while in kindergarten in the US, and how her love of learning languages led to her learning Japanese, her experiences feeling like an outsider in many cultures, and how she turned that into a strength, and the frustration that led her to her creating nihongojobs.com and ikigaiConnections.com in the first place. And the interview is pre-recorded, but Kasia is live in the chat, as you can see. She's already commenting that this is making her hungry. Thank you for that. And so please feel free to ask questions and comment during the interview. It's meant to be live and interactive. So without further wait, let's get into the interview, part 1 with Kasia Lynch. Kasia, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, my name is Kasia, and I've been, let's say, a citizen of the world. It's been a dream of mine to always be that kind of person to learn about other countries, other languages. And I think it's because I was born to Polish parents here in the US, and I learned Polish when I was very young. Then I started learning Japanese in high school, which helped me go there on a study abroad program. And the rest is history. I've had a great relationship with Japan. I've lived and worked there for 8 years. I also went to Poland to use Polish, English, Japanese in a career there. Went to Italy to learn a little bit about living a nice, relaxing life in Europe. Came back home to Michigan, and I've been using Japanese for practically 30 years. So I just really enjoy the concept of multilingual, multicultural topics. So I'm really excited to be here. And I'm really excited for your podcast. This is really great. I can't wait to hear all the episodes as they come out. So kudos to you for doing that.
Thank you. That really means a lot. Just having the opportunity to have guests such as yourself with all of the experiences that you can share with the audience. I think there will be a number of things that they can relate to as well. You just mentioned all of those different countries that you've been to and these experiences. We didn't meet in Japan, but it's always nice to meet someone else who has spent time in Japan.
Yes, we have lots of stories, I'm sure, that are very similar. Our experiences as a non-Japanese person in Japan, coming back to our respective countries and experiencing that reverse culture shock as well. There's a lot there.
You mentioned that you felt like a foreigner in all of the countries you lived, including in the US.
Yeah, I went to kindergarten not knowing English. And I remember for some reason, the English language was very easy for me to pick up. And I was reading advanced books already as my peers who have been speaking English their entire lives were still in their regular books and level of reading. But I was just so infatuated with learning how English worked. And I read a lot of things. I read how the grammar and structure works. But then I moved that passion over to Japanese when I was learning Japanese too in high school. I will say that unfortunately my Polish isn't as strong as I would like it to be. But as I was growing up, I went from the Polish to the English, and I always felt like I was different. I also always had this Polish community I was a part of. So in my high school, maybe I didn't feel like a part of the group. And then I went to Japan as a junior in high school. So that made me always a little bit different because I came back and I now saw my entire high school career, shall we say, as different because I had experienced living in the middle of nowhere in Japan. And now I'm back to what I thought was normal. It was just so eye-opening to see what is out there in the world at such a young age. But of course, when I lived in Japan, I always stood out because I had long blonde hair and people knew that I wasn't Japanese. I should say I still felt like I fit in because I was so appreciated by people around me, my school, my friends, my host family. So I never felt like an outsider. I just felt that I was different. And then after that, I went to Poland, which even though I am of Polish descent, I don't really speak Polish very well. So everywhere I walked, I felt like a foreigner too, because I probably looked different. My clothing was probably different. I didn't have the same Polish style. And when I'd go to the grocery store or a little mom and pop bakery or something to pick something up, I never could get the grammar correct for the counters. And I was kind of afraid to speak in Polish. So I felt different there too. Of course, in Italy, I didn't really learn the language as much. I was definitely a foreigner there. So it's just everywhere I've been, it's always been like an outsider looking in. But the biggest shock to me was coming back home to Michigan after my years abroad. I was 8 years in Japan, 2 in Poland, 1 in Italy, came back. So all my adult years were overseas. And now I'm trying to get used to American life again. And I don't know the pop culture. I don't know the movies that were funny. And I can't laugh at the same jokes. I don't understand why something is popular. And that reverse culture shock really messed with me for a little bit. But now looking back, I realized that all of those were just great experiences, and it made me appreciate my life here more because I'm seeing it from a different perspective. And I feel as if it's made me a stronger person too, even though it was difficult at times. I'm sure you can relate with that too, with that not feeling like you really belong and you should, but then you're like, well, I'm a different person now because of my experiences. So it was just kind of mess with my head, but all in all, a good experience.
I completely relate to what you're saying about reverse culture shock after you've been away from your home country for a number of years. It's that old adage, being the fish out of water. The idea that when you're the fish in the water, you don't even really think about the water around you, which is exactly the whole idea with your home culture. It's just always there and you don't even see it. You just assume that's just how life is. And it isn't until you spend time outside. And then when you come back, that you really notice those differences. Oh, and okay, this is not necessarily the way that I think anymore. You mentioned that you developed a certain empathy as a result of being an outsider. What else can you say about that?
Yeah, it made me realize how lonely it can be. I deal with a lot of different kinds of people who want to get a job using their Japanese or English language skills. I also meet with a lot of Japanese people who have come here. It's their first year. They're really nervous to use their English. They don't know anybody. Maybe they brought their family, so they might be a little bit lonely. So I see that and I completely know what it's like to be that person where you just entered something new and everything is fresh and you have no idea. I always talk about living in Japan, knowing how to take your garbage out, how to recycle that specifically. There are some rules involved with that. It's not as simple as what we have here in America. We just take your bag out and it's done. Those little things that you don't really know the unspoken, let alone the spoken and the written rules. So I see that and I feel very empathetic towards them. And I kind of want to help make them feel welcome because I had people who welcomed me to their world. I really feel like when you have that outsider's perspective, you can understand both sides and you want to be that mediator to bring people together, that glue that kind of binds them because you understand both sides. You know what it's like to live in America. You know what it's like to live in Japan or whatever other country you want to pick. And you can just have each side take one step closer to each other so that they're more unified because at the end of the day, we're all really people, right? We all have different ways of thinking, beliefs, etc. But like I remember just going to Japan one of my first times and being like, wow, there's more than one right way to do something. In fact, getting a little philosophical, there may not be an actual right way of doing something. There's multiple ways, whether it's building architecture for a house or something. I was used to a typical suburban style home in this area of Michigan. And then I went to Japan. I'm like, wow, these houses are incredible. For some reason, I was really interested in that. There's different styles and ways of doing things. And it's just makes life better and more exciting when you're able to see that there are other ways and then you share them with everybody. So I just like to be that glue.
I like what you say about being that glue or being that bridge, as I've also heard, between different cultures. And it doesn't necessarily always come naturally. It doesn't necessarily come by just living in another country. But once you come to that realization that, like you specifically said, it's not that one way is better. It's not that this other way is worse. It's not my country is better or Japan's way of doing it is better. It's when you get to that realization, they're just different and they each have different strengths for different situations. The world really needs people like you who can act as that bridge. And for you for doing that. And of course, that's exactly what you're doing with Ikigai Connections. So what else can you tell us?
I started this company 4 years ago because of the pain that I experienced when I was looking for a job. I was stubborn and I absolutely wanted to use my Japanese language skills in a career. And I did it the hard way. And this is quite a while back where email wasn't necessarily the means to apply for jobs. And you had to handwrite, at least in Japan when I was going for my first job, you had to handwrite all your entry sheet that you had to send out. Each company had to get their own, and it was just so much work. And it was difficult for me to constantly try to convince these employers, like, yes, I will work so hard. Just let me work here and get this experience and share what I know and grow with you and just trying to convince them that I could handle the Japanese side. And obviously that job search was very difficult. And I did that in various countries. And so I like to think that maybe I can share my experiences to help people, not only just sharing what I've experienced or what I've heard other people experience, but also just giving job seekers the confidence that, and I'm talking now to anybody who has, whether it's multiple languages or various skills that may not necessarily be appreciated by employers or society in general. There's so many things out there that can be done from a career perspective. Like I always talk about the word ikigai, which in Japanese, for any of your listeners who don't know that word, it's become a hot topic lately. It's about your passion, but there's a little bit more to that in the Japanese sense. I think that if you would like for your life passion mission to be related to your career, then it's important to find something that you like to do. And there's so many people out there who just want to use Japanese in their careers. So if I can just help inspire them, give them inspirational words and tips and tricks that they can do so that they can also keep sharing that message to others. I believe that these people who have these multicultural experiences, regardless of what country you're applying for a job in, wherever you want to work, whatever language combination, by sharing our global citizen experiences, we can help companies. This equals money for candidates. This equals great ROI for companies. To me, it's just a win for everybody involved. And I just want to keep promoting that, all at the same time having these, I call them kakehashi employees, which kakehashi means bridge in Japanese. You can have these people who have multicultural experiences be that glue again within the company, within the headquarters and subsidiary, between the company and clients. Be that glue. It's more of a human experience. So that's my mission.
That's such a valuable thing that you're offering. As you said, not just to the people who are looking to use their Japanese skills, but the companies. And as I understand it, many Japanese companies, if we think traditionally, a lot of the top executives in the local branches were Japanese, but now that's changing over from what I've seen to have more locals simply because they understand the local areas. Someone inside the company who can be as a bridge for both, who has those language skills and has that understanding of both cultures, like a big advantage.
I think it's a huge advantage. Unfortunately, not every company understands that just yet. So I'm sharing this message. I'm trying to share as best as I can. I do my best in Japanese as well, too, just to inform companies that their human resources are absolutely necessary. If you don't have staff to help your company isn't going to survive as long as you'd like it to. So if you have good staff that wants to be there, that feels appreciated, and then on top of it, you've got these people who just want to be these bridges, there's so many good things that can come from it, and less miscommunication problems, more of a sense of teamwork that people want to be there and work together. And hey, we have this issue that happened, this problem, whatever, let's do it together mentality, I think just makes everything work out much better. And of course, I'm talking in such a way that may be all fairy tale-y, woo-woo stuff, but like it's true. Like humans are needed for work. You need to have them be happy and fulfilled to work at a company, and the company benefits from having these inspired, motivated employees. It just works out well for both sides.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, corporations are made up of people.
Exactly.
Right? And if the people are motivated and they're happy with what they're doing, and they feel a sense of purpose in what they're doing, then they're going to perform better. The profits will go up. And frankly, having those different viewpoints, those diverse viewpoints, as many studies have shown, leads to increased profit.
There's less turnover, less cost you're spending on trying to find new people and train them all over again. It's a very tough problem, especially now that's more of a job seekers market. And there's a lot of turnover because employers who are at some company and don't feel appreciated see that there's another company that may appreciate them more. So they go where they're going to be appreciated. It just makes sense to me, but I understand that it's a little bit difficult when you've got hundreds or thousands of employees. I completely understand that there's a lot of factors that come into play and wage differences depending on the area and industry. There's a lot of factors that do come into play, but I guess I just see it very simply as let's have a team, let's work together and get these multicultural people that can help make all that a little bit more succinct. Hopefully more people will start appreciating people like us.
I have a feeling that as the world gets smaller, that understanding is going to become much more important for corporations.
Yes, I hope so. Definitely.
I want to backtrack a little bit into some of your experiences that you've had over your time in other countries and also in the US as well. Some of your earliest experiences, whether it was coming to the US for the first time or when you first went over to Japan, anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, I think one of the things is being Polish. So I was actually born in the US, and my parents, when they came here, they knew no English. They had very little money. Poland was communist at the time, and they're trying to start a new life. And I've always known of that story of my parents trying to find something better, make improvements, go for something that had more opportunity. And they worked their butts off to do that. And then when I was figuring out like where I wanted to go, what I wanted to study, I remember my dad just saying, just go out in the world and see what's out there. So going to Japan at age 17 was my first main, like it was the longest stay, even though as a teenager, I did go to Poland just for a week or so with my family. That was different because even though I thought I was 100% Polish, you go visit your family in Poland and it's hard to understand each other because obviously my Polish wasn't amazing and I'm hearing and seeing what they're doing, what they're wearing, what they like to do, what's cool, what music they listen to. Like that just as a kid is just, wow, it's pretty amazing it's very eye-opening to see, wow, here in my cousin's hometown, they're listening to this kind of music, which was like 3 years after what was popular for us here. And it's those little things that really stand out the most for me. What song was popular and, what people with TV shows, so they liked. I remember for some reason I was watching TV with my aunts as a kid and Rod Stewart was just huge in Poland and all the ladies loved him. And I was like, who is this guy? Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. Of course he's famous and I knew of him, but it was just interesting to see what was popular overseas. And then at age 17, going to Japan and just like being in the middle of nowhere and having little children, school children walking by on their way to school, looking at me and being like, Kasia, and running away, which means foreigner in English. And they're like, why are these kids so scared of me? But they weren't scared. They were just playfully aware of me. But it does things to your brain too. You're like, why is that happening? And gosh, I'm so lonely. I can't understand what people are talking to me about in Japanese because I'm still not very good at Japanese. But then, of course, you always have people who are very welcoming too. So even though that was so many years ago, I still keep in touch with my friends from that high school program because they welcomed me. And I just felt like, wow, even though we can't understand each other, we're sitting together having lunch. Of course, the teacher made us do this, but we're sitting together eating lunch and we're sharing what's in our little bento box. And they would try to take me to a music concert or, hey, let's go take a look at what this Michigan boat is. It's a very popular boat in Shiga Prefecture, which used to be very popular. I don't think it exists anymore, but that's a different story. So all these little experiences that kind of still I feel are very strongly in my heart, even though it was many decades ago, are just a testament to how people are so kind. And especially now, I was talking with other people the other day. Now there's a lot of negative news and people are feeling tired and the pandemic has just left this image of people. But then I just remember there's great people out there. We all just have to find each other and help each other out. And someone is.
All right. And yes, that was part one of the interview with Kasia. And I'm just sharing, as you can see below, some of the comments from Byron Baron V, who has been in Japan for quite some time. And yes, mentioning, mainly coming from and returning to Latin and relaxed countries like Venezuela and Spain until the point of feeling foreigner in your own hometown. I can certainly relate to that to some extent. Well, not being from Latin America myself, but as you know, my wife Liliana is, and we did take a couple of trips going from Japan, stopping through Canada briefly, and then continuing on to Buenos Aires. And it was certainly a big contrast there, I can imagine. And yeah, a bit of an adjustment for Liliana as well, and for me, experiencing those different ideas. And Chie Schuler as well, who was a past guest on the show, commenting, I'm pretty sure I'm forgetting many of the culture shock, but when I came back to the States after 2 years in Japan, it took me longer than I'd wanted to get used to driving in the US again. Yeah, driving on the opposite side, and I imagine all the other experiences as well. It could be pretty dangerous. And oh yes, a quick visit from Liliana. Hi, Kasia. I'm sure you made a positive impact on all those people in the places you lived. I would agree with that as well, no doubt. All of the work that she's done and all of what she's doing right now with Ikigai Connections is fantastic. All right. Well, we're actually coming close to the end of our time. So I just want to remind you that, of course, part 2 is coming up next week with Kasia. And in this part 2, we'll be talking about Kasia will talk about the role of empathy in bridging cultures, how you can help bridge cultural gaps in a business situation, even if your language skills aren't perfect, and the importance of keeping a learner's mindset. So, with that said, until next week, keep navigating your way between cultures towards your goals. Thank you, and see you next week.